It is week 12 of distance learning, second graders. I can't believe it's the last week of our school year. This week we're going to be working with words that have digraphs. Digraphs are words or chunks of letters that blend together to make one sound. Our first digraph is SH, and it says shh. CH says ch. TH says f. Now I should see that tongue sticking out in between your teeth. Some of you have a little difficulty with that sound, so when you do the TH, I want to see your tongue stick out, and it tickles a little bit. CK is another digraph, k, and it usually happens at the end of a word. Let's talk about our words this week and what they mean. Our first word is the word clock. You are very familiar with clocks. A clock is an instrument that helps tell time. Dock is a place where cargo and ships are loaded and maybe parked. A dock. The word harbor has two meanings. A harbor is a safe space where boats can enter, and it usually is circular or rounded, and it is protected from the ocean and the really harsh current. Also, harbor is an action. It means that you take care of someone. Island looks like island, is a body of land that is surrounded by water. Landmark, that's a compound word, and those two parts together, land plus mark, makes landmark. A landmark is a special place that is marked by a monument or building. Many times it has historical meaning. Something special might have happened there, or it might even be something that represents a country or something that is natural that's been there a long time. Ocean is a very large body of salt water. Reach has two meanings. Reach can mean that you arrive somewhere, you get there, like I reach my destination. It also might mean you stretch your arm out to grab something. Shame. Shame can be dishonor or disgrace. It's a feeling of guilt. Ship is a large boat that can travel across deep water. Shoes, a covering on your foot. Thank is when you tell someone you are grateful. Thought is the past tense of think. It's when you have an idea. Torch, a flaming light, just like the one that's held by the Statue of Liberty. Journey, a very long voyage, like the one that immigrants had to take from Europe. Shore is where land meets water. This can be at a river or an ocean or a lake. You can have a shoreline along those bodies of water. We're deep into our story, Lily and Miss Liberty, and this week we're going to read a story that might confuse you by its title. It's called I Hate English. Can you imagine what this story could be about, and why would the author call this story I Hate English? Before you read I Hate English, I'd really like you to look at the cover and think of the title. Use the picture in the title to help you make a prediction. What do you think the story is going to be about? And what were the clues that helped you? Really be detailed in your answer. You're almost third graders. I know many of you might dislike things, and sometimes we might use the word hate. I know it's a word that I'm not a fan of, but I want you to think about, has there ever been something that you really disliked or hated? And I want you to think about, well, what is it? There's a few things in my life that I'm not a fan of and that I really dislike. So I want you to think in your brain, what's something that you've hated? I really want you to try to make a connection because this title is very strong. This is a rather long story, and there are during reading questions that I'd like you to answer, and I think it's really important for you to get your brain activated. Before you read the story, go through those during reading questions so you're prepared. And if you come across the answer, you can stop or slow down and go back and write them so that you don't have to memorize the story or try to find the answer later. That would be really helpful. That's what we did in class, remember? In your plans, you're also going to find a link for a story that I love by one of my favorite authors, Patricia Polacco. She wrote a story called The Keeping Quilt. And it's another viewpoint of what it's like for immigrants. And something that you might have in your family is an heirloom or a keepsake that's passed from one generation to the next. I have a special keepsake that I would love to show you. It's called a hope chest. I hope you enjoy these stories this week and have just a little bit more of a respect and appreciation for people who have come over from other countries. Immigrants endure a lot of challenges and they have a lot of struggles. So it's really important to have patience and understanding of what other people are going through, because you were born in America and you don't have nearly the same number of challenges and struggles that someone who is new to the country might have. This week, you're going to be researching and becoming experts about the Statue of Liberty. There's so many amazing facts about this beautiful landmark, and I really want you to explore the internet and the resources that I've given you. I've linked you to some books on Epic, getepic.com, and I've put books in everybody's library so that you have books that are at your level that you can read. Also, I've photocopied several research pages that my students... In the describing wheel at the end of our unit, I'd like you guys to look at that word in the center. The topic is immigrants, and I would like you to think about different details or words that you think of and that relate to immigrants and immigration. So I think you've learned a whole lot through reading these stories, our discussions, even talking about your family trees. So I want you to jot down ideas and things that remind you of immigrants, even phrases. Are you excited? I'm going to have you make your very own passport. So I would love for you to decorate it, and you can include a picture. You can think about where your relatives came from, and that can be your country of origin. And there's a sheet with all these wants and needs. And what I want you to do is think of what would you definitely need and take with you if you were to travel. Now, keep in mind, immigrants traveled with very small suitcases and they couldn't take much with them. Most of the things that they owned and loved had to be left at home. So this might really hit home with you and really help you relate to them and how difficult that decision might be. Because if it didn't fit in the suitcase, you couldn't bring it. You had to leave it behind and start from brand new. Let's talk about measurement. So in our lives, we are going to need to use different tools for various reasons all the time. So when we measure, we need special tools. So one of the tools we're going to be using a lot is a ruler. So I've made 2 rulers for you. You're going to find them in the package that I left at your doorstep. One is pink and one is orange. And you're going to see that one says inches. That's the orange one. And it's also going to be used for yards. And the other one says centimeters, and it also says on it meters. I really want to talk with you guys on how to use your special tools that I've included in your mailings. And we're going to use centimeters and inches today. I'm going to show you how to correctly use those measuring tools. First thing I want you to notice is that each one is labeled. So on the pink ruler, you'll see the word centimeters, and when you get all the way towards the end, you'll see that when you have 100 centimeters, that's what you call a meter. So I actually gave you an entire meter. And for the orange ruler, you'll see the word inches, and you'll see 12 inches is equal to 1 foot. And then when you have 3 feet, that's equal to 1 yard. So I gave you 1 full yard for the orange ruler. Can you think of a reason in your life when you would need to measure something? Well, I remember something from our plant unit. Did you measure anything for that? I have a really fun tip for you. So centimeters are very tiny. They're smaller than inches. What I want you to do is take a look at your pinky nail. A centimeter is about the same length as your pinky nail. Isn't that crazy? So when you're wondering, oh, how long could that be? How many centimeters? This is an estimated ruler right on your finger. You all have a pinky nail. Brady wants you to know something really fun. So for centimeters, those are the metric system, and meters are part of the metric system too. Did you know that most people all over the world use measurements from the metric system? And we use inches, feet, yards, gallons, and a bunch of other measurements that are really special and only used in the United States. Why does that happen? Wow, it's very interesting, isn't it? Now let's think about inches. If you take your thumb and bend it at the joint right here, from that knuckle to the end of your thumb is about 1 inch. Go ahead and measure it. See, it's pretty close, isn't it? Each day this week, I'm going to have you working on a few pages in this measuring packet, and it has different activities that are pretty easy to follow, and you'll be using your orange and pink rulers that I just showed you. I want to go over a tip on how to measure using a ruler because second graders tend to make the same mistake. It's a really common error and I want you to avoid it. Whenever you are measuring something, what you want to do is make sure that the end of the ruler where the measuring starts, that's where you also line it up with that item. So if I'm measuring this solid black line, I'm going to make sure it's like that. It's not over here or over here. It's going to start right at the beginning of the measuring. I'm going to show you what I mean. Some rulers like this one have more than one system of measurements. So we have a unit of measure that has inches and centimeters. It has both. So what you want to make sure you're doing is you're using the correct side of the ruler. Another thing that tricks second graders, so on my Cricut board that I have for my die cutter, the ruler doesn't start until this corner. It doesn't start at the edge of this piece. It starts here. So whatever you're measuring, you have to make sure it's lined up to begin at the beginning of what you're measuring. And you have to make sure that the material or whatever ruler you're using actually has started the measurement. So for this ruler, I can use, and it's pretty neat because I can see right away what the centimeters and inches are. Oh. And then when I use the ruler that I made, you can line it up. And I started it right at the end of the piece of pink. So you can see how many centimeters this one is as well. I'd like to go over, let's go over this example really quickly together. So if I line this up, I notice that it's more than 10, but less than 11 centimeters. So would you say it's 11 or 10 centimeters? For this example, I would say it's 11 centimeters because it's super close. It's almost touching it. It's more than halfway between the two, so it's closer to the 11. So it's about 11 centimeters. Now, I really want to know the unit. Now, you're lucky because it's labeled centimeters on this page, but we want to indicate, are you talking about centimeters or inches? Remember, it's really important to include those units, whether you're talking about money, inches, centimeter, yards, feet. You need to be really clear. So those units of measure are really important and will really make a difference in your answer. Let's take a look at inches and centimeters. So I see that 1 centimeter, the abbreviation is cm, is that size, and then an inch is here. So if we were to compare an inch or a centimeter, which one is bigger? Can you think of an item that you would use centimeters for? What would you measure with centimeters? Would it be something big or something small? What about inches? Can you think of something you would rather measure with inches? Now remember, when you bend your thumb, that's an inch, and the length of your pinky nail is a centimeter. So what object would you use an inch for, and what object would you measure with centimeters? So think about that. We're going to do an example together today. So I'm going to be measuring this whiteboard. I've been using it throughout my videos during distance learning. So I'm going to measure with centimeters and with inches. So I'm going to have you make some predictions first. If you were to look at this, here's the size of my hand. How many centimeters tall do you think this is? I'm going to write down my prediction. I'm going to make a prediction about the height of this board. I'm going to write it down. So when I look at this, I notice that it's pretty tall. So I don't think it's a meter or 100 centimeters. I think it's less than that. But it might be, in the 60s. I'm going to predict 64 centimeters high. I wrote my prediction, and I also wrote my label talking about centimeters. And when I talk about how tall something is, when we're measuring two-dimensional objects, we talk about that being its height. So we have length and we have height. So let's see what I predict for my inches. I think it's definitely taller than a ruler, which is a foot, which is 12 inches. So let me think. It might be 2 feet, and I know 12 plus 12 is 24. So I'm going to say it's 24 inches tall. Now, does this make sense to you? Aren't inches bigger? Why is this number smaller? Let's think about that. I drew a picture. This is the length of a centimeter, and this is the length of 1 inch. So, does my prediction make sense? Should there be more centimeters and less inches when I predict the height? I'm going to go ahead and measure using my ruler. I'm going to put the end of it here, and I'm going to straighten it out and take a picture. When I measured in centimeters, the height of this board was 56 and 1/2 centimeters. It was halfway between 56 and 57. If I wanted to, I could round it up and I could say it's 57 centimeters. It was pretty close. So I'm going to leave that, and then I'm going to go ahead and measure in inches. Let's see. Again, it's really important you want the end of your ruler where the measurement starts to match up. I'm going to make sure it's nice and flat. I'm going to go all the way to the end. It's very hard to videotape while doing this. And as you can see, it's a little more than 22, but it's less than the halfway point. So what I'm going to say is it's about 22 inches. It's 22 and 1/4 inches actually. But I'm going to round it down to 22 because it's super close. It's closer to 22 than it is to 23. I'm pretty proud of my prediction. So what I want you to think about is, how does that make sense? How come there's only 22 inches, and they're bigger, and there's 56.5 centimeters for the height of this board? I think it's backwards when you look at it that way. But I want you to think, why do you need less inches but more centimeters when we're measuring? And we made our predictions and we actually measured. How does that make sense? And does that happen when you measure other items? So I want you to really have fun with your measuring tools. And when we measure length, height, and width, the ruler is going to be the best tool, right? And you have to decide what unit you're going to use, because you want to know ahead of time, like, is this a big object? Is this a small object? Am I going to have to use a large unit or a small unit to measure? So I want you really thinking about what we just talked about. Brady and I are really sad to say goodbye. This is our last YouTube video, but we are excited to see you Friday at the Zoom meeting at 11 o'clock and on Tuesday at our regularly scheduled Zoom meetings.